My name is Roy E. Rathka, Jr. I was born December 7th, 1928. I turned 90 years old December 7th, 2018. And I was born at 332 West Auburn Road in my grandmother's, August Rathka and Anna Rathka's home. And it was an upstairs bedroom. And my mother and father didn't have a house at that time yet. They weren't married too long, so they were staying with my grandparents. Yeah, my father's name is Roy E. Rathka, Sr. My name is Junior, and some people said I should drop the Junior off of my name, but I'm going to keep that in honor of my father, so I keep my name as Roy E. Rathka, Jr. Well, my father was a farmer, and then he got a job as a chemist. I don't know exactly how he got that job. I don't know if he went to schooling for it or what, but he worked in the chemical lab of Pontiac Varnish Company in Pontiac. He mixed paints, experimented with them, cooked them to see how they reacted, after a painter would use them, and stuff like that. Evenings and weekends he worked on a small farm that we had. So we had like 3-4 cows, and some corn and vegetables and stuff like that he farmed, so raised a couple pigs, so. My mother's name is Iva Briggs Rathka, and my mother's maiden name is Iva Briggs, and she's Iva May Rathka now. My mother was a full-time housekeeper, and she was a great cook, and we always had plenty of food, good food, and we always had dessert also, either homemade pies or cakes. Oh boy, she made everything so good. I don't know what would be the apple pie, I would say. Yeah. My father and mother had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, and I'm the oldest of the 6. Sometimes she helped with the chores if it was needed. She had about 6 jobs between taking all the rest of the chores and trying to keep 6 kids in line. Well, my dad bought a piece of property across the street from my grandparents, and he built a house. The address is 271 West Auburn. Spent a lot of time at my grandparents across the street. There was an orchard next to our house, and we had a path that we traveled every day back and forth from my dad's house to my grandparents' house. So, you know, my grandmother was always a good cook also, and it was always fun going over there. We used to had BB guns, and we'd a lot of sparrows back then, and we would shoot sparrows out of the pine trees, stuff like that. So I guess one time I had a BB gun that shot the windows out of the neighbor's chicken coop. That was got in trouble for that. We would help the farmers. They always needed help, so they would hire me to drive team on a hay wagon, and they paid me 10 cents an hour, plus I got a farm meal at noon, which was really good. So one time we had a runaway from Bill Giles. He lived on Auburn Road next to my grandfather's, and my dad and Bill Guile was on the wagon placing the hay when it come off the loader, and I was driving the team. And one of the horses must have got stung with a bee or something like that, because it bolted and started running. They both started running. So Mr. Guile took the reins, and we still had the loader on behind us, and we went across the field and made a 90-degree turn down the lane and headed towards the barn, and the barn had a rise going up to the floor, and he run the team right into the barn, and it was open on the other end with like a 10-foot drop into the barnyard. But the horses had enough horse sense that they stopped before they went over the edge. It was quite exciting. Another time I was working for Bill Gile's brother, John Gile. They lived at a farm down here where Brooklyn School is, and I know a bee stung one of the team there. The wagon was empty, and because they were shocking wheat, and no, they were shocking corn, loaded on the wagon, and the horses took off, and I was by myself on the wagon, and I just steered the horses around the shocks of corn until they stopped. So that one wasn't too exciting. It was nice, so remembrance anyway. Back then there was quite a few animals around: rabbits, pheasants, skunks, and stuff like that. And one time my grandfather mentioned that skunks made good pets. So I was working for Buster Guile at that time. He had bought a baler, and it was a wire-tied baler, and it had two guys. Buster drove the tractor, and one fellow on each side the baler, and we used partition blocks, and then put two wires through the blocks, and the other fellow on the other side the baler would tie it, and in the windrows of hay, once in a while we'd kick up a skunk. So one day, Burton Jungle at that time was working on the other side of the baler, and I asked Buster, I'd like to catch one of them skunks one day. So we did chased a skunk out of the windrow, and so Bert and I got a big clump of hay and held it in front of us, and we chased the skunk down and threw it on the skunk, and then the other fellow would get him in a burlap bag, and we leave him there to the end of the day and then pick him up. So I took him home and put him in a barrel, I remember, and kept him for 3-4 days, but I never did have him de-skunked. I guess I just let him go again. So, but we had skunks in the barn too, so we was always fooling around with skunks. And I'd come home, and my mother would say, looks like you guys been playing with the skunks again today. She could smell it, yeah. Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was never too good in school. Went to Brooklyn School, just down the road here, 1 through 8th grade. I finally got out of the 8th grade, skipped school a few times, went over to Green Glen, riding a toboggan with a couple other kids. I remember one time they expelled us for 3 days. It wasn't too bad, it was more like a vacation. And then went to high school, but I only lasted there about 6-7 weeks. I didn't like going to school, I guess, so I told my dad I'm going to quit. So he says, well, if you're going to quit, you're going to get a job and pay room and board. So that's what I did. I thought that was better, but I was wrong. I should have studied and stayed in school because you needed it back then, and you need it more today than you did back then. You could always get a job doing labor work back then, but now you need an education to get any kind of a job. So I made a mistake. I was called for military service. I was already married. I must have been in 1950 or 52, something like that. And I had my physical, and the war ended, so I didn't go in the service. I had my physical and everything, but they didn't call me. Yeah. After I quit school, I had to make a little bit more money, so I worked at Fisher Body, and they had me polishing windows inside and out on a line, and I didn't like that job, so after 4 hours, I walked out at lunchtime and never came back. And then I worked at Pontiac Motors division in Pontiac. I wasn't there too long, maybe a year. Got another job at GM Truck and Coach, and I worked there a couple, 3 years. It was a pretty good job, and I don't know why I quit there. Maybe to get more money, so I went to work for Ford Motor Company at 9 Mile and Mound, straightening axles. While I was working for Ford Motor Company, I had a foreman there that was pretty strict, about you keeping busy and getting the jobs done, you know. So one day I had something happen. He came to me and he said, "You're wanted at the gate." You know, at the gate there was two guards, and when you left your car at the parking lot there, they would check your ID and badges and stuff like that to make sure it was okay to go into the plant. So he came to me and says, to go out to the gate out there, you're wanted out there. There's people waiting for you out there. So I said, well, I'll punch out. And he says, don't worry about it. So he said, just get going. So I got myself and I rushed out to the gate because I thought something bad had happened to my family. Well, when I got out to the gate, here was two girls. It was like midnight because I was working on, it was either in the afternoons or a late shift. So they had come and they wanted me to go out with them. So we drove around for a couple hours or so in their vehicle, and then they brought me back. The next day when I went to get my card to punch in for my time, I see that the foreman had punched me out at quitting time, so he had given me 8 hours work, which I was only there maybe a couple, 3 hours. So he was a pretty good guy after all. So that was kind of a experience that I remember, you know. So it was a good surprise to a couple of girls come pick me up. From Ford, I went to H.D. Osgood as a apprentice carpenter. So here I am today, a retired carpenter builder of some sort. When I got married, January 20th, 1950, I was working for Ford Motor Company at that time, 9 Mile and Mound, working on a punch press, straightening axles. And my brother-in-laws, Harold Griffin and Howard Schulert, Betty's brother, were roofers, so I was doing roofing with them part-time. And then when Betty and I built this house at 2863 Hickory Lawn, or even the first house at 2865 Hickory Lawn, my neighbors Eric and Clyde Schinke were both carpenters, and they worked for H.D. Osgood at Company as a fire repair company and office remodeler builder. So Eric asked me if I wanted a job there one day. So I said, sure, because I didn't like working at Ford's. That was, working inside. It was like going to jail every day. So I quit Ford's and went to work for H.D. Osgood. And I went to apprentice school at the same time. And 4 years I got a journeyman's carpentry license. In the meantime, when I was working for Osgood, when we do a job, a house fire, something like that, and need shingles put on, I would put the shingles on for them evenings and weekends. So, and after working for Osgood for a few years, I got my journeyman's carpentry license, and I went and got my builder's license also. I quit there, and I thought, well, I'll go in business for myself. Betty's brother and brother-in-law, they were in business for themselves, and I could always put on shingles if I didn't get any work. But I got some work building garages and additions, bathrooms, stuff like that. but first year I only made less than half of what I did working for Osgood. But after that, I had got some referrals, and I started doing better every year, a little bit better. And then I got into building spec houses, so that's how I ended up being a builder. Not a big builder because we did a lot of work ourselves. Joanne's husband, Randy, and Tim, and myself, the three of us, they worked for me more or less by the hour. It was good that way. We did everything ourselves, so we roughed the houses in, we trimmed the houses, we put the shingles on, we put foundations in, did concrete work, did tile work. Back then we did it all. But you can't build a lot of houses when you do everything yourselves, you know. Today we're just builders. We don't just pay bills. The last 3 years or something like that, I've been getting out of the building and letting Tim take over more. So right now, it's just happened just the last year that I should have did this 40 years ago. I should have let Tim take over, you know, because he's doing a good job of it, and I should have. I always figured that it couldn't get along without me, you know. Young people they're pretty smart too, you know. So I guess I should have been smart enough and let him take over like 40 years ago instead of waiting until this last few years, you know. So maybe if I'd have went to school and learned more, I would have did things differently. So it's been a good life. So yeah, I had free time. I went on vacations. Went on three boat cruises. Went some hunting trips with my dad and uncles. Went to Alaska a couple of times, you know. So I had some good times along the way, and a lot of enjoyment that a lot of people I don't think ever did, you know. So. I had a 37 Ford, and it had headlights in the fenders, and this fellow I bought it from had headlights on top the fenders, so it was quite an odd looking vehicle. And it was a stick shift and had a gas heater in it, and which didn't work most of the time. It used gas from the gas tank, but when it did heat, it really heated up the car. So, but anyway, that car got stolen from Pontiac Motors, and the police found it a few days later. So that was okay. I got that back, and then I bought a 1946 Pontiac while I was working at Ford. Should be a Ford vehicle, but anyway, I bought a Pontiac. It was a two-door, green and white, sharp-looking car. When I met Betty 2 or 3 years later, I had that vehicle, so I met Betty Lou the summer of 1949. Betty was 16 years old, and I was 20 years old. My cousin, Bob Mosier, was a friend of Harold Griffin's. And at the time, Betty and her brother Howard were living in the upstairs of Harold and his wife Jeanette Schulert's home on Hawthorne and Royal Oak. The reason they were staying with Betty's sister was that Betty's mother passed away from stepping on a nail and got, I think they call it lockjaw poisoning. And she passed away, and they lost their home, and so the family kind of broke up, and Betty's father, Emery, married another woman that didn't get along with the kids too much, so they went out and lived other places, like with their sister, you know. So that's where I met Bob Mosier, introduced me to Betty. We started going together, and we got married the following January 20th, 1950. Betty was still 16, and I was 21 at the time. So we had to go to Betty's father, Emery. Schulert was living in Sandusky at that time, so we had to go to Sandusky to get his permission for her to get married. So it seems today that 16 years old is too young to get married, and I think it is, but we both seemed older at that time for some reason. I can't quite place it, but 16 years old is seems to me at 90 years old is awful young, but Betty was a good housewife right from the beginning. I think she wanted to be a housewife, so that worked out real good. She was a good worker, a good cook, and couldn't ask for anything better. The first date, I don't remember. I probably went to a movie. It's a funny thing, though. After we got married, we never did go to movies. I asked Betty if she wanted to go to a movie, but for some reason she never cared to go to movies again. So I don't know why, and she never told me. So we were always together. Yeah. We never. Only time we were ever separated was if I went on a hunting trip with my dad and uncles, or a couple times I went to Alaska. We were separated then, so for not very long though. So yeah. We always vacations and everything. We always went together. In fact, when we went out west on a hunting trip. Betty went with us one time, and my brother's wife, Virginia, went also. So, and Bob Mosier's wife, she went also. So it was kind of a family thing, you know, kind of did a little hunting and a little sightseeing at the same time. So, well, to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So. My first home was, my dad found a place on Crooks Road, just south of Auburn Road. A fellow had made the top of his garage into a little apartment. And we rented that the first night that we were married. We didn't have anything. And Harold Griffin, Betty's brother-in-law, had bought a crate of eggs, so they give us a couple dozen eggs, and we had some bread, and I had some milk, gallon of milk from my dad, from the cows. And the first night when I got home, Betty had that prepared for supper, so that was great. She liked being a housewife. Yeah. We was only there about a month when my dad found a place on Hickory Lawn, 2865 Hickory Lawn. And that was on a 125 by 350 foot, 1 acre lot. It didn't have a foundation, so 2 bedroom and 1 bath. And we bought it for $3,000, and the furniture was $500, and it came with a cat. The first night we stayed there, and I could see why he had a cat, because there was some rats in the house too, and there was a rat that got in the springs of our bed, and I could hear this noise. When I looked over the edge of the bed, out jumps this rat, and the cat was after him. So he got up the wall and in a hole away from us, and so we ended up moving that night over to my dad's house, because Betty wasn't going to stay there when a rat was that close. So then we started patching up holes, and we moved back in the house. So then my dad found some barn timbers, so we put them underneath the house, and we jacked it up, and then we dug a basement underneath the house by hand with a slip scraper. We had the house up on jacks, and it was in winter time, and the wind was blowing under, and we had about 6 steps of concrete blocks laying up to get up into the house. So that's how that happened. And then worked for Osgood, and we saved up a little bit of money, and Clyde Schenke and his father Eric next door, they built a house. And so I got a loan from National Bank of Rochester, and Betty and I built a new home at 2863 Hickory Lawn about 1960. And we lived in that house till 2000. So, and my father loaned me the $500 down payment, and I got a $3,000 loan from National Bank of Rochester, and the payments were $35 a month. So, yeah, times have changed. We had 2 kids. Joanne was the first child, and I remember she cried a lot, keeping us up at night. But after that, things went pretty smooth, you know. And then we had Tim a year and a half, 2 years later, something like that. And so we ended up having 2 kids, a boy and a girl. And that's all Betty wanted to have, so we stopped there. So. At Christmas, we always had a lot of presents. Betty see to that. I remember one time I bought a train, and we had it underneath the tree, and that was a pretty nice train. So after a couple months, when I got tired of playing with it, I put it, boxed it up, and put it away. The next year, I wrapped up the same train in a box and put it underneath the tree again. But one of the kids brought it up and said that's the same thing as they had last year. So I guess I couldn't get away with that anymore. So, and then we used another thing about Christmas time. I got a picture of one of our Christmas trees someplace. I'm always looking for a deal, so I got this Christmas tree, but it was a natural tree. It wasn't a trimmed tree, and there's branches going every which way, and some missing, and everybody made fun of my trees that I had every year. They were natural trees. Didn't look like artificial trees, anyway. So something that you'd get right out of the woods. So, in the wintertime we had 3 wheelies that we'd ride around in the yard because at Hickory Lawn we had a big yard, so we rode them around the yard and pulled them around with toboggans and stuff like that. Seemed like we was always busy doing something, so that was nice. Time went by fast. Yeah, we had the 2 grandchildren. Joanne got married to Randy Peterson, and they had 2 children, Stacy Peterson and Randy Peterson Jr. And Stacy had 3 girls, Samantha, Katie, and Ashley. And then later she had another boy named Matthew. So we was lucky that Stacy gave us 3 grandchildren. We appreciate that. So and we had a lot of fun with them too. We were fortunate enough to be able to buy a motor home, and we went to Disney World with that several times. So that was with my children, the grandkids, and then the great-grandchildren. Betty was awful easy to get along with. I made mostly all the decisions. There's only a few times that Betty ever put her foot down. We had rented a motor home, and we had an awful lot of trouble with it, keeping it running and stuff like that. And so we decided to buy one ourselves. So we went to the show to look at motor homes. We looked at several of them. There was a Chieftain there that was the same size as this Pace Arrow, but the Pace Arrow was a nicer made motor home, and I wanted to buy the Chieftain, but Betty didn't want that motor home. The Pace Arrow cost $10,000 more, so we ended up buying the Pace Arrow. So that made her happy. So I'm glad of that. So she always, when it come down to it, she knew how to make the right decisions. I was always looking for a little on the cheap side, looking to make a better deal on something, so, which I guess is okay in a way, but you shouldn't use it all the time, Another time, we took vacations in the summertime up at Black Lake, up near Onaway, Michigan. And my brother and I, 16 months younger, Ray Rathka, we decided to buy a place there. The fellow that we was renting from, he wanted to sell part of what he had. He had a 6-unit motel and a house and 4 cottages on Black Lake. So we made an offer to him for the house and 2 cottages. So we went in partners and bought the house and 2 cottages on Black Lake. So that was good. We used that for several years, but it seemed like when you have partners owning stuff, you know, it's hard when you want it, they want it, and when they want it, you want it. So so we ended up selling my half to my brother Ray, and so we spent 2 years looking for another place at the Michigan, piece of lake property. We ended up finding a place on Houghton Lake. We looked at several places during that 2 years, but they all had drop-offs, and neither one of us could swim. So we were afraid of drop-offs. We didn't want the children to have any trouble, you know, drowning or anything like that. So we were being pretty careful of where we bought. So Houghton Lake goes out shallow for quite a ways, so it's good for kids. And we wanted a place that was close to the water. And we looked at some other places there, but this one place was close to the water, only like 30 foot to the water. So you were right close to the kids when they were in the water. I wasn't in favor of buying that place because just down the road, there was a motel for sale that had like 8 units and had 150 foot on the water. And I thought, well, we could buy that, we could stay in one of the units, and we could rent out the other, and we could make some money doing it that way. So we went to the real estate office to make an offer on this motel. And Betty isn't saying anything. So we get just about ready to sign the papers, and Betty says she wants to wait. She don't want to sign the papers yet. So I said, okay, well, we'll go home, we'll think on it, and see what we want to see for sure if this is what we want to do. So we get in the car, and it's about, I think, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. It's getting later in the day, and we're heading back home to Rochester, Michigan. And we're going down M55, and Betty says she really don't like that motel, and she'd like to get something that's safer and something she wants, you know, that instead of what I want. So I said, okay. So I made a U-turn, and we went back, and we put a deposit on the house that she liked. So that was between the motorhome and the house we bought on Houghton Lake. That was 2 things that she made up her mind that that's what she wanted, and they was the right decisions too. So. Year 2000, the great-grandgirls were growing up, 3 great-grandgirls. We decided to build a new house in Shelby Township. It's a split level, and we first bedroom on the first floor and 3 bedrooms upstairs. So we built this split level on a lot that I was saving in Kingswood Estates subdivision over there, a subdivision that another fellow and I developed. And it had a little creek in the backyard and the woods beyond, past that. So I liked that lot. where my dad was raised, they always had a little creek there, so it kind of reminded me of that. So I saved that lot for myself, and Betty and I built this new home. And three great-grandgirls, they each had a bedroom up there. They visited us quite a bit the first few years, but then they grew up too fast, and we didn't see them much after that. Well, my happiest memories would be my uh, getting married to Betty Lou, and family get-togethers. My mother and dad always lived close to us, just around the corner on Auburn Road. Betty and I spent a lot of time with them, and Betty was like a daughter to my mother. So we used to kid that my mother liked Betty better than she liked her son. So, and maybe that was so, because Betty was a good girl to get along with. She was always happy. They did ceramics together, and they spent a lot of good time together. So uh, our other good lifetime friends was Ray and Orpha Carrier. We went on trips with them. We went to Las Vegas to a few times, to Hawaii and Florida. We would see them almost every weekend. So they were our best longtime friends that we had, and they both passed away. Ray just passed away recently. He was, I believe, 91 years old. So fishing and hunting, I guess that was the two most things was always thinking about doing. November 15th was the opening day of deer hunting. That was a big event planned. Everybody would go up north to Uncle Les's place in Ossinake, Michigan to go deer hunting. The other big time was October 20th was pheasant hunting. We had a lot of pheasants around at that time. We'd go up in the thumb of Michigan pheasant hunting. So, and that was my aunt Ruth's birthday was always on the 20th of October at that time too. So we caught nice sized salmon when the salmon came into the Great Lakes. Yeah, we caught quite a few good salmon. Yeah. Church's Lumberyard sometimes would take the builders on a trip. So they took us down to one year. They took us down to Cabo San Lucas at the end of the Baja Peninsula. They had rented three boats there to go marlin fishing. So my salesman Neil Renshaw, we got up to the latest of the guys, the builders, and when we got down to the dock there to get a boat, the only thing left was an older boat with a couple of Mexicans running it. I know we went over to get across the bay to get some bait. They used bait that was about 12, 16 inches long, kind of a fish of some sort. And I know the boat that we had it would cough and have a big boom and split out black smoke. And I thought, geez, are we going out fishing on this thing? So we headed out in the Sea of Cortez, and we were traveling along pretty good clip, and they put out a couple lines, and we were going so fast, I was about ready to tell the captain, we can't catch anything going this fast. Got a fish on the line, and we caught a sailfish. So there was 4 builders on there. Well, 3 builders and my salesman from Church's Lumber Company. So it'd take turns of who brought in what kind of fish. So they brought in a sailfish. It was a nice, pretty sailfish with a big sail on it. And the fellow didn't want to mount it, so he let it go. So we kept on fishing then, and we caught a marlin, but that was a smaller one, about 60 pounds, I guess. But it tired itself out, and it died. So we kept that marlin, which we didn't really want to keep because it was smaller. And then we hooked another one, and I got the line that time, and it was a nice medium-sized marlin. I got it in. It was 130 pounds, and I had it mounted. It put up a good fight. It would get up on its tail and dance across the top of the water. So I kept that fish to get it mounted. And we hooked another one, and it was a big one. We only seen him once. He must have been 300 pounds or more, and he just took off away from the boat, and I took all the line and broke the line and kept on going. So when we got back to the harbor, the other boats were in, and none of them, the other 2 boats, they didn't catch any marlin. Here we had these old Mexicans. We caught a sail and 3 marlins. The other boats, they caught some sort of fish that was about 3, 4 foot long and had a yellow head on it. I guess they were good eating, but it really wasn't a trophy type fish, But they didn't catch any marlin. So these old Mexicans they knew what to do, and where to go. It was a good experience trip we had. A lot of fun. This fellow wanted to go to Africa hunting, so he asked me if I wanted to go. I said, yeah, I'd like to go. So we was getting the trip planned and everything, and things got kind of the relationships at that time with the other countries wasn't too good. So he said we should cancel out. So we canceled out the African trip, and I thought, well, you got me all enthused now, I want to do something. So I used to get these outdoor magazines, and the last page on the back of the magazine had an outfitter by the name of Pennell and Tellefson, and they worked out of Kodiak Island, and they offered grizzly brown bear hunts. They always had a picture of the barn and 3 big brown bear skins tacked up on the barn, So I sent a letter up to them, and they sent me back a letter that that I could get a permit to hunt brown bear on Kodiak Island. So I went up there in April of, I don't quite remember what year it was, maybe 78 or 79, I think, something like that. Flew into to Anchorage, and then I took another plane from Anchorage to Kodiak Island, and then Pennell and Tellefson, they paid for my way from the town on Kodiak Island to Olga Bay, which is on the other end of the island. they brought in a Grumman Goose float plane, and they flew me down to their camp at the other end of the island. It's the first time I ever rode in a float plane, which is kind of adventuresome too. It had it was a prop plane, 2-engine prop plane, but it had a lot of power. It could lift up real good. And they flew me down to their island on Olga, to their camp on Olga Bay, and then they brought in another plane a couple days later. It was like a Cub with skis, and they flew me up to Fraser Lake, and from there we hunted on snowshoes. It was in April, so there was a lot of snow yet, and we hunted brown bear. We would go out and with the binoculars and a spotting scope and go to another location, so get up on a hill someplace or side of a mountain and glass around for a brown bear, and we saw this bear, so we went across the lake and got up close to this brown bear. Was in the alders. I shot at the bear. He stood up, and I shot again, and then he just growled and went back down, and I shot again, and he was still doing pretty good. So I was surprised because I had a 300 Weatherby that he could take that much lead, but the last bullet somehow got in the back of his head and killed him. So then they skinned him, and we took the hide and the meat, the head, and packed it up and went back to camp. So I had an elk hunt, which an elk is a smarter animal. The bear he figures he's the king. He's not afraid. So you don't have to stalk a bear much. So the elk is more like a white-tailed deer. He knows what's going on around him all the time, So Randy and I went, and we each had a guide of our own, and we took several horses up in the mountains, and it was like 85 degrees when we went in. And when we was there, it started snowing, and all the time we were there, it never stopped snowing. There was about 4 foot of snow when we left. It was rubbing on the horses' bellies, but it wasn't like Michigan snow. It was like powder, it was real light. So we got in the middle of, I think it was about 3 elk were bugling, and we started moving around, and this one elk come into a little clearing. It was probably a couple 300 feet away, and I shot him with my 300. He went down right away. So. In 2008, Betty passed away, and then because we spent so much time together, I guess some people are okay being alone, but I wasn't okay with that. So I guess I didn't know if I was going to get married again or what. I didn't think so, but so I met this girl that her name is Juanita, and she's 13 years younger than me, we ended up getting married. We had some problems, but as of this date, it looks like it's working out. Juanita's husband passed away a few years earlier than Betty did, so we were both single, and she was married 41 years to a fellow by the name of Bill, and I had been married 58 and a half years. Looks like we're both giving each other good company at this time, and doing some small things together, movies and stuff like that. No big trips, but at my age, I'm just happy having company and doing little things. So I don't think I'm going to take any big hunting trips or anything like that anymore. On religion, I believe in God, but I don't go to church like I should. Although my dad had us baptized in the Lutheran church, we do go, but not every Sunday, you know. So, but I believe in God and Jesus, and I guess everybody should, you know. Everybody has their own thoughts on that, I guess. So. Any regrets? Sometimes I eat too much. Yeah, I think as you get older, well, anybody, they got to be careful where they're walking. Uh, Lift your feet so you don't stumble and fall, because falling is one of the biggest dangers of people young, and especially people as they get older. And don't move too fast. Watch where you're going, and don't be afraid to use a cane and a walker. My sister just passed away just over a week ago. She didn't want to use her cane or walker. She's 86 years old. They went to Florida. She fell in the bathroom, and I guess the operation went okay as far as I heard, but there was too much of a strain on her heart, and she had a heart attack and passed away. She was a good, hard-working person. She had 5 children. It's too bad that she couldn't have been more careful, and she could have still been living today. So I feel bad about that. I guess just be careful when you're older. Don't get in a hurry. Yeah. I don't know, just getting up and getting busy doing something, you know.